Thank you very much. I'm sorry to say that in my presentation, on my slides, there are no data visualizations and other fancy things, but I have a motto, an analog one, and I put it on the desk so you can see that instead of looking such things on my slides. So, please allow me to start with a personal memory. We were on the way back to Budapest from Peter Esterházy's funeral in a minibus in 2016 when my then boss's husband, who happened to be the deputy rector of the ELTE and an excellent historian, by the way, was sitting next to me. And I told him with great enthusiasm about the huge academic forum the Digital Humanities Conference in Krakow was, and how sad to see the complete lack of Hungarian participation. The rest is history. A year later, the Center for Digital Humanities was established at the ELTE University. There's no question how grateful I am to Peter Esterházy, topic of my PhD thesis, to whom we owe our center as well, in a way. However, Esterházy's work only provides us with a starting point and illustrative material for this lecture. For lack of time, we will not discuss here the characteristics of Esterházy's prose, but only note that the philological problems arise from the concrete tasks of a project that has just begun. The aim of the project is not modest. We have set out to produce an annotated digital critical edition based on genetic principles of one of the most complex prose texts of the 20th century Hungarian literature, the production novel. There is no question that one of the keys to Esterházy's prose is intertextuality. The opus magnum, Bevezetés a szép irodalomba, lists more than 1,000 names from whom the author quotes, either literally or in distorted form. In his lifetime, an annotated edition of one of his novels was published, including a collection of quotations. He was accused and brought to trial for his quotations. To produce an annotated edition, it is a great help to use a tool that can reliably, verifiably, and reproducibly identify intertextual links. So in order to find the right tool to solve the specific philological problem, let's turn to the recent literature on the subject. Enrique Manhavakas, Volkert Kalstorp, and Mike Kestemont, in a study under the title A Statistical Foray into Contextual Aspects of Intertextuality, sum up the status of computer-based intertextual analysis. Nor can there be any question about the validity of the trio's argument that the identification of loci similes by character-level matching as the most popular and perhaps simplest method of text reuse detection contributes little to the contextual interpretation of intertextual links formed by similar text locations. However, we have decided that in this first phase of the research, we will only investigate the possibilities of string similarity-based automated text reuse detection. In other words, if we imagine a distribution of intertext types, considering an axis of literality, going from literal quotation to elusive reference, we focus on the literal pole without ignoring structural, grammatical, or lexical variation, which are very common in Esterházy's quotations. The special situation of Hungarian language and Hungarian language technology makes the application of methods based on the exploration of more complex semantic or syntactic relations uncertain. The natural language processing tools, from POS tagging to dependency parsing, that would be effective in the context of Latin and English are less effective when applied to Hungarian, and there are few examples of their application to Hungarian literary corpora. The use of NLP tools trained mostly on everyday language is particularly challenging for a prose that often makes use of neologisms, puns, and language games, and ironically twisted idiomatic structures. In this presentation, we will report on the results of an experiment that can perhaps best be described as source code criticism. The term stems from a workshop entitled Source Code Criticism, Hermeneutics, Philology, and the Didactics of Algorithms, which was held in March this year, online of course, with as distinguished speakers as Matthew Kirschenbaum. The workshop examined the various ways in which code can be read, interpreted, and made accessible to current and future readers. So in the following, we will read and interpret a code, and if the experiment will be successful, we will make it accessible to current and future readers. The code we are undertaking a critical reading of is the software created by the Yale University Library Digital Humanities Laboratory named Intertext, which the above-mentioned paper classifies under the damning label, a very narrow conception of the phenomenon of text reuse detection. The main reason for choosing this software is that it has been available under a permissive license on GitHub code repository, meaning that the source code is readable in its genesis or step-by-step development. The second and not least important criterion for the selection was that the code language is accessible to the authors of this presentation as it is written in Python. The third important criterion is performance. According to the project website, the tool is designed to be able to explore intertextual network of large text corpora, and the sources of Esterhazy's quotations are literally countless. A fourth aspect is the user-friendly interface and visualization functionality. The two can be made easily accessible to researchers who do not read or write codes themselves, so it fits to our department's scope to provide services for humanities scholars. A further motivation for the venture is to provide an example of how algorithms hidden behind the user interface shape what the machine throws at research questions. The platform on which the above-mentioned annotated Esterhazy edition stores and version tracks the XML code and the scripts for text manipulation is also GitHub. This fact adds an exciting overtone to the enterprise of critical code reading, as the text annotation created by the philologists, and finally, codes developed to read and compare the texts, they exist in the same environment. It is an interesting, almost shocking fact that the software's website does not mention any of the algorithms that actually perform the text similarity check. The short description, just a few pages long, describes the functions provided by the user interface and then mentions parallel software projects. The only references to how the algorithm works direct us to the concept of min hashing, to an otherwise excellent textbook chapter on text similarity, and to a software implementing the min hash method. It is also surprising that the tool does not ask its users to cite a study written by the developers, as it is often the case of digital humanities tool development. As our investigation is rooted to a concrete philological task, we will now read the code of Yale Intertext in itself. We won't read it in itself, but we reflect upon it through texts, the similarity of which it measures. The work that, for our present knowledge, is the most cited work in the production novel is not Eckermann's Gespräche mit Goethe, the work alluded to in the novel on different levels in an ironic tone, but Esterhazy's first published prose book, Fancsika és Pinta. We use these volumes for text similarity detection. As one would anticipate, based on the references given by the developers, Yale Intertext calculates string similarity by exploiting a quite complex method called min hash. Or meanwise independent permutations locality-sensitive hashing scheme. The scheme, invented by Andrei Broder in the late 1990s, and was used in the AltaVista search engine to detect duplicate web pages and filter them from search results. To show the way how Yale Intertext is built on min hashing, we take a paragraph from a book that is based on Stanford Computer Science course, Mining Massive Datasets, and published by Cambridge University Press. There are three main steps in the process: converting textual documents into sets of their elements, convert large sets into signatures, estimate the similarity of sets by the Jacquard similarity. The mathematically most complex part, namely converting the sets into signatures and compare them instead of the large sets themselves, has solely a part to spare computer capacity and so time. No wonder comparing millions of websites while preserving the search engine's speed is vital for user ergonomics. Still, in case of text similarity measurement, the whole procedure functions as a very fast approximation to a simple similarity calculation. So we must conclude. We do not need to understand the min-hash algorithm to understand how Yale Intertext compare texts. The painfully beautiful hours I spent studying the scheme were thus of little use overall to our venture. In a way, this claim is supported by the fact that the min-hash signature generating and comparison code is not inherent to the software, but is provided by a general-purpose data similarity calculator, also available on GitHub by the name DataSketch. It seems that source code criticism itself cannot ignore the exploration of intertextual relationships. The next step in understanding how Yale Intertext actually works would be to see how documents are converted into sets. Although from a philological point of view, this is one of the most important features, as it defines the smallest particle discernible for the system, the function is partly implemented by the above-mentioned, often quoted code, DataSketch. So it's not part of the Yale Intertext. The documents are cut into n-grams, word n-grams, 40 words by default, started with every fourth word, and then sent to DataSketch to be cut into character n-grams, 4 grams by default, starting with every single character. Each 4 grams generated of the 14 words of a window is hashed by the built-in functionality of NumPy Python package. Duplicates are removed, signatures are generated, and each window of every document is compared by Jacquard set similarity to each other. If the similarity ratio reaches the minimum similarity ratio, by default 50%, the window pair will be marked as similar. Given the amount of comparison acts involved, it is not surprising that the usability of the software depends on the inclusion of performance-tuned tools designed to compare huge data sets. For the 2 volumes of Esterházy we are comparing, the number of window pairs exceeding the minimum similarity ratio is more than 8,000. If you are not undertaking a critical code reading, this number stays invisible since the user interface only shows the final result, 57 hits. It is only to be found in a table match candidates in an SQL database hidden in a cache folder. The most fascinating part of reading the Yale Intertext code is the disclosure of this gap between the 8,000 and the 57. Yale Intertext calls the first set of similar pairs match candidates, and the process that forms the final set of text correspondences, named validation of matches, is based on Python's built-in class from the difflib module called sequence matcher. It is not an exaggeration to say that the description of the tool, which nowhere mentions the use of this class or the underlying method, is misleading, since even a philologist who happens to read the references in the description of the software will not be informed of the actual operation of the algorithm, not until he reads the line 1260 of the intertext.py file of the original code. So it turns out that not only the min-hash scheme, but Jacquard similarity calculation as well serves solely to speed up finding a huge amount of potentially corresponding text segments. That's why default similarity ratio is set to as low as 50%. Pre-selection collects window pairs with partial overlappings and let sequence matcher to do the rest, or from our point of view, the heavy lifting. Although it is not as fast as min-hash approximation to Jacquard similarity, but as fragments with no or very limited overlapping are excluded, it does not slow down the overall process. Let's take a look now at the similarity calculation standing behind the sequence matcher. Gestalt pattern matching, or Radcliffe-Oberhalb pattern recognition, was published in the mid-80s, and it's defined as follows. Compute the similarity of two strings as the number of matching characters divided by the total number of characters in the two strings. You can read the rest. I have to proceed. What does it mean in practice? After identifying the longest character match, the algorithm looks for matches on either side of the match. What does it mean here either? It compares the remaining string fragments on the left and on the right side of the matching substring. Left to left, right to right is compared. If we take a look at the actual matches the function produces, we see a mix of relevant character segments mixed up with single characters or very short character engrams that has no meaningful contribution to an evaluation of text reuse. So they are not really intertext. Another equally serious problem is that the function does not compare left to right and right to left. So according to our experience, rewriting methods common to Esterhazy's intertextual practice, when the citation changes the order of the words taken from the quoted original text, will produce low similarity ratio, and in the meantime, irrelevant word fragments are counted as relevant part of the match. There is a possible solution which may solve both problems of stringwise comparison caused by the unreflectedly implemented Gestalt pattern matching in Yale intertext, though it is clear from the start that it makes the runtime slower. The solution is simple. If we remove the longest match from both the strings to be compared and repeat the longest common substring detection and deletion time and again till the longest match reaches a minimum parameter given by us, two short fragments can be eliminated from the similarity calculation, and those matches are counted in as well, which are positioned on different sides of the previous longest match. The first results are promising. Word sequence changes are now tolerated by the new method, but further investigations and benchmarking is needed to implement the correction to the code. Now we can venture to an at least preliminary conclusion. Without correcting the similarity ratio problems, similarity measures calculated by Yale intertext cannot be taken for granted. There are other problems we identified in our critical close reading of the code destined to perform distant reading. As there is not enough time to go into them in detail, we will just mention three of them with possible solutions still to refine. In Yale intertext, text pre-processing is totally missing. A certain level of normalization would certainly increase accuracy. The first tests that implemented an aggressive normalization on the similarity calculation level, filtering out anything but alphanumerical characters and white spaces, and lowercasing the string, gave us much better results in case of typographic variation between source text and the code. Second, Yale intertext is very weak on determining the start and end tokens of the text pair. One reason for this is that the system does not treat the window sliding, 4 tokens by default, so an actual intertext match happen to start within a window slide, 1, 2, or 3 tokens are attached to one or both sides of the calculated match, although they are not part of the actual text match. We are currently testing a method to cut the edges of the window-based matches till the similarity is peaking, but it seems to be very sensitive to normalization, so further tests are needed. This is a JSON produced by the code, and here you can see the intertext ends at that point, and 2 tokens here and 3 tokens on the other text segment. These are not parts of the intertext, and we hope it will be easy to remove them. Thank you. It will take time till we solve all the above problems just to get to new ones that may not be solved by a pure string similarity calculation methodology on Yale intertext is built upon. We should soon be faced by problems as, say, filtering on different forms of phrasemes, proverbs, and idioms, which are certainly valid examples of text similarity match, but they have less to do with literary intertextuality. Wish we were there. Thank you very much for the attention.